Hey there, cinephiles, and thanks for watching this upcoming video. In 2005, one of the biggest movies ever was being released, the final episode in one of the most groundbreaking film franchises of all time. My 9-year-old self fell in love with the series, watching every single movie in anticipation. Of course, there was the original trilogy that was beloved by most audiences, but I instead decided to start with the first episode, the prequel, the one that was supposed to start it all. And with that, this small Minnesotan boy fell in love with Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This is the kind of movie you love as a child. It's colorful, it's imaginative, it has good music, it has a child in the lead role so you can find some kind of connection there. He's a blonde boy? Hey, so am I! I love this character so much I dressed up as him for Halloween. And I went and saw Revenge of the Sith in theaters in costume. Mind you, it wasn't opening weekend, but still, I felt pride. For a while, this was my favorite Star Wars movie. This, Jar Jar Binks and Watto and yippee! I thought this was everything I'd ever need out of a sci-fi fantasy space opera. And then I found a connection to the online world, did a Google search, and found out something that had never crossed my mind before. Everyone hates The Phantom Menace. I think I swayed from the crowd for a couple years after learning the hard truth about everyone's least favorite installment. I still found it to be enjoyable. Kind of. I guess it gets a little boring at times though, and maybe I forgot about a couple of weird scenes. Maybe some of the characters do look terrible. Maybe some of the action beats go on either too long or not enough. Maybe Darth Maul is just kind of lame. Okay, I've faced the truth. After years of rewatches, I came to realize more and more that this is a truly boring spectacle. An experiment for George Lucas to show off how truly dull a Star Wars movie can be. I remember hearing in documentaries and videos all featuring different fans who had a distaste for this episode, at least giving the movie credit for being a children's movie.
You know, it's hard for people to realize, and I'm not supposed to say this, and I wasn't supposed to say it then, but you know, it's a film for 12-year-olds. That's
because, yeah, children love it. I did. And maybe it'll be like the original Star Wars and people will grow up with it and just ignore any other issues. Children of today won't have the baggage of the original trilogy holding them back. Maybe this will be a nostalgic treasure for them. Well, as someone who was a kid when this movie was released, nostalgic it is, but treasure it is not.
Return of the Jedi.
After Return of the Jedi, I'm sure there were many individuals out there hoping to see more of the story that took place before A New Hope. That story Ben Kenobi told Luke about his friendship with Darth Vader, who was previously named Anakin Skywalker, could create for some exciting stories involving the Jedi before they went extinct. And seeing that it took 16 years for George Lucas to finally bang out a story, it's understandable why expectations were high. So, what happened? Why does this one especially annoy fans? It's not like Star Wars has ever been 100% perfect. People already were complaining about Return of the Jedi, and the next two prequels got hate as well, along with the sequels. What makes this one so much different? Well, I think people tend to nitpick the hell out of this one, simply because there's nothing else to pay attention to. The story is nothing that should be expected from Star Wars. Other episodes had a group of fun, charismatic characters who go on adventures, run into trouble, take on giant armies, and end up on some kind of climactic note. In this movie, that sort of happens at the beginning. Not really charismatic characters, but we have two leads who gain a gang of characters as the story goes along. We got different planets, see new things, and with credit to Mr. Lucas, at least we are seeing original stuff this time around. It's not a complete nostalgia-filled romp. However, things really begin to slow down once we get to Tatooine. It's a pretty unbelievable circumstance that I can't really grapple with. Their ship is damaged, so they need to buy parts from this racist caricature named Watto. By the way, I won't be digging too much into the alleged racist characters in this movie, but I am seeing what everyone else has seen, and It can be uncomfortable. Watto won't accept Republic credits, so they instead decide to use Anakin in a pod race in order to win them the money needed for the parts. There's also a bunch of extra gambling scenarios that manage to get Anakin's freedom as well, but it's all hedging on Qui-Gon's insistence that this boy is special and has extraordinary powers with the Force. For the most part, the entire second act is just from the perspective of these characters only, stuck on this planet, and it just doesn't do what we've come to expect from Star Wars. Even when they get off the planet, they end up going to Coruscant and they're talking politics. Even the opening crawl is all politics. I don't really mind it as much as everyone else, but think about it. It's already written and filled with dialogue that's designed like a congressional bill. This just doesn't have any kind of excitement or drive. The characters just lack any kind of emotion or care. Qui-Gon is a disappointment. He's built to be a modern Yoda, but his death and delivery just proved to be forgettable. The other characters do nothing. All the cameos are just there to be cameos. Darth Maul is a disappointment, and Jar Jar Binks, well, I'm not gonna waste time, but he's annoying and loud. He's no Chewbacca. But with all the story decisions, there seems to be one that comes to define everything that is wrong with the Phantom Menace and why it tarnishes everything that had come before. Midichlorians. This seems to be the main sticking point to viewers. They not only hate the midichlorians plot piece, fans believe it completely destroys the mythology of Star Wars. And who can blame them? In the original film, the Force was meant to be this magical spiritual feeling, something that comes not only from yourself, but from some place beyond. It takes not just knowledge or strength, but a great amount of faith for the Force to live through you. I love the 1977 version of this phenomenon, as Luke goes on a spiritual journey. He manages to gain the courage and faith needed to destroy the Death Star and save the galaxy. It has always been related and contrasted to religion, how people find faith in something beyond themselves, devoting their lifestyle to something that may or may not exist, sometimes to varying success. I think the original trilogy stays faithful to this premise, and the newer movies have done the same. Luke's journey still continues in The Last Jedi, which shows that the Force doesn't make you a perfect soul, but it can still do remarkable things and bring peace to mind. Some people thrive off the Force without being a Jedi, in the case of Donnie Yen's character in Rogue One. It's not a measure of how much religion you have, and it doesn't have to rely on heritage, as the character of Rey has proven, just as long as they don't retcon this in The Rise of Skywalker. So it's understandable why people hated the scene where Qui-Gon measures Anakin's midichlorian count. It turns something spiritual into a competition, creating rules for the supernatural. In fact, Anakin apparently came into existence from nothing except midichlorians, making him a Jesus baby. I would have the same problem with this as everyone else does, but in my head, I can at least create a purpose behind all of this that still falls in line with the original's handling of the Force. I don't know if George Lucas intended it this way, and I'm probably just writing stuff in my head, but to me, I think the midichlorian count is meant to be a failure of the Jedi. Why would the Jedi, something that closely resembles a religion, feel the need to count midichlorians as a way to determine if someone should be a Jedi or not? Well, I think the midichlorians are meant to be bullshit. There's a reason why Palpatine was able to take over the Republic without the Jedi ever sensing a thing. It's because their religion had lost its way. It had become a place of rules and politics, being more focused on following the instructions rather than discovering their spirituality, much like how many religions in the world tend to do. I think it's meant to be an allegory for the real-world religions that need to focus more on faith and less on the dogma. And midichlorians, a measure of how much force you have, is another piece to this puzzle of failure. It all builds up to when the Jedi completely crumble, and just think, these ideas disappear in the original trilogy. And in the sequels, Luke tries to make the Jedi a religion again in The Last Jedi, and it shows that turning the Jedi into a structural religion fails again. Or maybe the midichlorians is just a dumb idea introduced into the lore for the purpose of over-explaining everything. In any case, there seemed to be one thing that people praised with the prequel trilogy. Ian McDiarmid as Sheev Palpatine, aka the Emperor, aka Darth Sidious, aka that guy in all the heavy makeup from Return of the Jedi. He was brought back to reprise the role that he made famous in Episode 6, and while his presence in The Phantom Menace is minimal, it helps to set up one of the most energetic and fun performances we've ever seen. I think the subtitle is meant to be directed at this character, seeing that he's in the shadows, making subtle arrangements for his ascension to the throne. In fact, I don't think he always had a fully formulated plan from the beginning. Do you think he looked at Jake Lloyd and said, "Yes, this will be my tool to succeed"? I think the plan was always changing, but his calculation and determination is what made it happen. He's a standout from the rest of the cast, which begs the question, just how much of the acting can be blamed on George Lucas's alleged bad direction? The consensus seems to be that Lucas doesn't know how to direct actors, being more focused on the scope and the effects of the feature. I guess this held true in the originals as well, but given that he didn't have as much freedom on those movies, and they had a lot of different people on set, you can start to understand why the acting in these movies is just so terrible. Every line delivery, when it isn't coming from Senator Palpatine, is wooden and boring. They talk like this is a class reading of a Shakespeare play. And I know these episodes are heavily influenced by the works of Shakespeare, but I promise, Shakespeare actors would have more fun. It can't be the fault of the actors themselves. Liam Neeson and Natalie Portman have been good before, so what happened here? Even Ewan McGregor, who, for as much praise as he gets nowadays, I still don't find him to be too interesting. He just happens to emulate the best version of a young Alec Guinness. Everyone seems to come after Jake Lloyd, but I honestly don't find him to even be that bad. Granted, they had this other kid in line to be Anakin before Lloyd was chosen, and the other kids seemed to be better, but at the end of the day, it's a child actor being given the biggest role of all time, so what do you expect? There's only a handful of very talented child actors out there, and for what Jake did, I don't think it's bad. I mean, in comparison to everything else, anything that can be construed as annoying or dumb can be blamed on the writing. Of course, when he yells, "Yippee!" it makes you squirm, because anybody saying that line would make us squirm. It's a stupid line that can't be said normally. In my opinion, I think Anakin would have worked a lot better had they just made him older to begin with. Have him be Luke's age when he's found. It would have made more sense for his angsty side that would allure to the future of Darth Vader, and his relationship with Padme would make more sense. So is it really all George Lucas's fault, or could the actors have done something better? Well, if you watch the behind the scenes footage, I think you'll get an idea that everyone on set was a yes man. No one was going to challenge Lucas. He made a movie in 1977 that the world loved, but he was disappointed in. So he wasn't going to let any of that supposed mediocrity get in the way, unless it was something from the original trilogy that he truly loved. The only thing in the original movie that he thought was better than imagined was the music. No matter what you think of these first 3 episodes, I think we can all agree that John Williams delivers the same kind of effective and beautiful work that was brought in the original trilogy. All the returning motifs are nostalgic and fun, but the new stuff is just as memorable. Duel of the Fates is just electric, bringing together a choir and the fast-paced nature of other Star Wars pieces, making it stick out as a mythological backdrop to an otherwise messy climax. I like the slow moments and the thunderous noises. I like how the Force theme returns when Anakin says goodbye to his mother. I don't care what you say about the script or the acting, the music saves this scene and turns it into a real tearjerker. Just as the music saved the 1977 landmark film, John Williams saves what could have been an even more disastrous flick, especially when you see the effects. Okay, I shouldn't really be harping on the special effects, but it has been said before, and I kind of agree. I think the computer takes over just a tad too much in this movie, to the point where it doesn't even look like a Star Wars film. Granted, I still think it's groundbreaking. When you think about it, the most that computer graphics had been used in movies before had been with Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. And while that's great, it was only for a few shots, and most of it was in the dark, which helped distract from it being noticeable computer images. When you jump to a couple years later and suddenly we have entire worlds and characters being created by the computer, and not like Toy Story or Bug's Life where everything can look animated, this has to look real and interact with real people. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Despite the complaints, I do actually find Jar Jar to be a pretty good special effect. Some of the worlds turned out pretty good, and the space battles especially work well. The pod race, while I don't find it to be the adrenaline pumping moment that everyone else finds it to be, I do think that the craftsmanship here has aged the best. The optical effects mixed with the real sets, real props, and CGI make for a pretty seamless scene. Some stuff is just plain bad now, and I wonder how good it was at the time. Watto can look okay, I guess, but it's obvious when he's in front of a blue screen or that he's not really there. A lot of the crap is thrown in for no reason, and the designs are not always pleasant, and these alien separatists are awful. This movie took the computer pretty far, and given what they had done with puppetry in the past, you'd think these characters would be better than this. So overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but in the end, you can't deny that this raised the bar for the effects community, and by the time we got to Revenge of the Sith, the effects were pretty mind-blowing. I figured once the new decade would come around, my generation would start to talk just as bad as the adults did about this so-called made-for-kids movie. Then, a funny thing happened. People actually started getting nostalgic for the Phantom Menace. I see people quoting it, analyzing it, actually praising certain aspects of it. It has kind of been driven by this meme community, which has helped to turn some of the smallest moments into a joke. Some people seem to be doing this ironically, but there's also a crowd out there that actually adores these prequels. Maybe this has been driven by the disdain for the sequel trilogy, or maybe it's because people finally gave it a second chance, or maybe the younger kids did end up growing up to like it just as much as kids did who grew up with the original films. Granted, when people are talking about the prequels, they seem to love Revenge of the Sith the most, a notion that I don't think anybody can argue with, and yeah, even as a kid I seem to watch that one the most, and it is the only one of the prequels that I can actually categorize as a good movie. So was The Phantom Menace still the worst Star Wars movie? It was a disappointment, given the high anticipation, building over 16 years. I don't think the world was ready for a Star Wars movie that was going to go completely off course with a completely different story, different characters, different worlds, and little references to the original film. Seriously, besides Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin, how much of this movie actually connects to the original trilogy? People disliked it for that, and for the overall feeling it delivered. I don't think it was a case of overhyping the finished product. I think there's actual structural problems with characters that can be annoying, and a story that isn't very fun. The negative reaction hurt many of the people involved, including Ahmed Best and Jake Lloyd, which isn't fair at all, and it especially hurt George Lucas, who I think just wanted to make a space opera that fit into his universe, but was at least original. It just ended up being a boring idea was all. But it at least tried new things, and I think the reaction ended up changing what would have happened in the future. As much as I love the Disney Star Wars movies, I can't help but notice that it's steeped so much in nostalgia, seemingly as a reaction to the prequels, hoping to deliver what audiences want to see, which is kind of more of the same. Even episode 2 and 3, while they stuck to George's intended story, you could tell he was compensating by giving fans Jango Fett, Chewbacca, and a bunch of connections to A New Hope. Even when the series still tried to do radically different things, like in the case of The Last Jedi, there's a group that hates it. It makes me wonder what he would have done had people loved Phantom Menace. But I don't think there's a universe where that happens. I think he was so fixated on the effects and the original intended story that he never thought about doing a second or third major draft. It doesn't have to do entirely with the lack of servicing the hype, it's just not that good of a movie. But I do kind of wonder if the crowd that hates it is truly as big as it's said. It was only after the internet started to bloom that the Phantom Menace was getting more and more ragged on. And even today, I find certain crowds that hate certain movies and it's then declared a disappointment. Yet, I have a hard time finding these people beyond the internet. I know people don't like the Phantom Menace, but every time I talk to people about it in public, there's never an absolute distaste for it. Makes me wonder if there's just a small minority out there that's loud enough to become the majority. I wonder if the cynicism has overridden any kind of positives that this movie can have, to the point where no one can see anything good in it. And at the end of the day, I don't think The Phantom Menace is the worst Star Wars movie. No, that distinction goes to Attack of the Clones. I'll see you next time, and may the Force be with you. And thanks to all my Patreon supporters. For only $7, you can get your own monthly movie review. Ask me to review anything I haven't already. There's also other perks like blogs, exclusive videos, and early access. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thanks so much for watching this video.